Every day, someone is trying to influence the way you think. Sometimes it's obvious. Most of the time, it isn't. They don't force your decisions. They shape your emotions. They don't control your actions. They quietly control your attention. The greatest danger isn't manipulation itself. It's living your entire life without realizing when it's happening. The moment you understand how influence truly works, you stop becoming an easy target. Manipulation rarely begins with deception. It begins with something far more ordinary, an emotional reaction you never questioned. A careless compliment changes your confidence. A harsh criticism changes your mood. Fear rushes your decisions. Pride blinds your judgment. The most effective forms of influence are almost invisible because they convince you that your reaction was entirely your own. This is why intelligence alone is never enough. Knowledge can fill your mind, but awareness protects it. The strongest individuals are not those who control every situation around them. They are the ones who refuse to let circumstances, emotions, or other people's opinions quietly control the way they think. Real psychological strength is built from the inside outward, and every step toward freedom begins when you master your emotional triggers. Every person has emotional triggers, whether they recognize them or not. These hidden pressure points quietly shape decisions, influence relationships, and determine how easily someone can be manipulated. A careless insult, unexpected criticism, rejection, praise, fear, or even the desire to prove yourself can pull you away from rational thinking in an instant. Manipulation rarely begins with logic. It begins with emotion. The moment someone discovers what consistently provokes you, they no longer need to control your actions directly because your reactions become predictable. The individual who cannot tolerate criticism may constantly seek approval. The one who fears rejection may accept poor treatment simply to avoid being alone. Another who craves recognition may become vulnerable to flattery, mistaking admiration for sincerity. Each emotional weakness becomes a doorway through which influence quietly enters. Most people spend years trying to understand the behavior of others while avoiding the uncomfortable task of understanding themselves. They notice deception in strangers, but remain blind to the habits that repeatedly place them in vulnerable situations. Self-awareness demands honesty. It requires asking difficult questions without defending your own behavior. Why does one person's opinion affect you so deeply? Why does disagreement immediately create anger? Why does being ignored feel unbearable? These questions are uncomfortable because they expose the emotional patterns beneath your decisions. Yet discomfort is often the beginning of freedom. The more clearly you understand your inner world, the less control those hidden emotions have over your choices. Emotional discipline does not mean suppressing feelings or pretending they do not exist. It means refusing to allow temporary emotions to become permanent decisions. Anger can make you speak words that damage years of trust. Fear can convince you to abandon opportunities that could transform your future. Pride can prevent you from admitting mistakes, while insecurity can persuade you to seek validation from people who have never earned the right to influence your self-worth. Every powerful emotion carries the potential to distort reality if left unchecked. The disciplined mind learns to recognize these moments before acting upon them. Notice how quickly many people respond when they feel challenged. A single comment changes their mood. A disagreement ruins their entire day. A compliment lifts them beyond reason, while criticism pulls them into self-doubt. Their emotional state constantly depends upon external events they cannot control. This dependence creates vulnerability because anyone capable of controlling your emotions begins influencing your decisions. Freedom begins when your inner stability no longer depends entirely upon praise, approval, or the opinions of others. One practical habit changes everything. Pause before reacting. Every strong emotional response creates a brief moment where choice still exists. Most people rush through that moment without noticing it. They defend themselves, argue, explain, or retaliate before reason has an opportunity to return. A deliberate pause interrupts that cycle. It allows emotion to settle and judgment to regain its place. This single habit often prevents decisions that later become lifelong regrets. Pay attention to recurring emotional patterns instead of isolated incidents. One angry reaction means little. The same reaction appearing repeatedly reveals something deeper. Patterns expose the areas where growth is needed most. Instead of asking why life continues presenting similar challenges, ask whether those challenges are revealing the same emotional weakness in different forms. Growth begins when repeated reactions become conscious observations instead of automatic habits. Self-mastery is not achieved through dramatic moments, but through consistent practice. Every time you choose patience over impulse, understanding over defensiveness, or reflection over immediate reaction, you strengthen your ability to remain guided by reason. Emotional control is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to experience powerful emotions without allowing them to become your master. The person who understands their emotional triggers becomes increasingly difficult to manipulate because they no longer surrender control of their decisions to temporary feelings. Separate facts from emotional stories, the human mind has a remarkable ability to transform limited information into complete narratives. A delayed reply becomes evidence that someone no longer cares. Constructive criticism becomes proof of rejection. A single mistake becomes a permanent judgment about personal worth. These stories feel convincing because emotions fill the gaps where facts are missing. Manipulation thrives in this space because people rarely respond to reality alone. They respond to the meaning they have attached to it. Learning to separate observable facts from emotional interpretation is one of the strongest forms of psychological independence. Facts are simple. They describe what actually happened. Interpretations explain what we believe happened and why. The danger appears when these two become inseparable. Imagine someone speaks briefly during a meeting. The fact is that they used few words. The emotional story might claim they were disrespectful, uninterested, or secretly critical, yet none of those conclusions can be verified without additional evidence. When assumptions replace observation, decisions become increasingly influenced by imagination instead of reality. Many forms of persuasion rely upon this confusion. Rather than presenting complete information, they encourage emotional conclusions. They create urgency before understanding, certainty before evidence, and confidence before careful examination. A dramatic headline captures attention because it appeals to emotion first. A persuasive speaker may encourage outrage before presenting balanced facts. Once emotion becomes dominant, the desire to investigate often disappears. The mind begins defending a conclusion it reached before fully examining the evidence. Develop the habit of asking simple questions whenever emotions become intense. What do I know for certain? What assumptions am I making? What evidence supports this belief? What information is still missing? These questions slow the mind and interrupt automatic thinking. They create space for judgment to replace impulse. Often, the strongest emotional reactions weaken once the available facts are examined carefully. Observation becomes more valuable than immediate interpretation. Instead of deciding what another person's behavior means, observe whether the behavior repeats consistently over time. One isolated event rarely reveals character. Patterns reveal far more than individual moments. Someone may disappoint you once because of circumstances you cannot see. Repeated behavior, however, provides stronger evidence than emotional speculation ever could. Patience allows truth to emerge naturally without forcing premature conclusions. It is equally important to separate your identity from temporary experiences. Failure is a fact. Believing you are a failure is a story. Rejection is a fact. Believing you will always be rejected is a story. Criticism is a fact. Believing you have no value because someone criticized you is a story. The mind often expands individual events into permanent identities. Recognizing this tendency protects confidence from becoming dependent upon isolated circumstances. People who are difficult to manipulate develop the discipline of questioning both external messages and internal narratives. They resist the temptation to accept every thought as truth simply because it feels convincing. They understand that emotions provide valuable information, but they are not always accurate guides for decision-making. By consistently distinguishing facts from interpretations, they preserve clarity even when others attempt to create confusion, pressure, or emotional urgency. Their decisions become steadier because they are built upon careful observation rather than assumptions, allowing reason to remain stronger than impulse. Learn the power of strategic silence. Silence is one of the most underestimated forms of strength because it cannot be easily measured or predicted. Most people feel an irresistible urge to fill every pause, defend every accusation, explain every decision, and reveal every thought. In doing so, they often surrender valuable information about their intentions, emotions, and insecurities. The person who speaks constantly gives others a map of their mind. The person who knows when to remain silent keeps that map hidden. Strategic silence is not about being distant or avoiding communication. It is about understanding that words have the greatest impact when they are chosen carefully instead of offered impulsively. Manipulative people often rely on emotional pressure to force immediate reactions. They provoke, criticize, flatter, or question you, hoping your emotions will persuade you to reveal more than you intended. When you refuse to react instantly, you interrupt their strategy. Silence creates uncertainty for the person attempting to control the conversation because they can no longer predict your next move. It gives you time to observe instead of merely respond, allowing you to notice inconsistencies, emotional shifts, and hidden motives that would otherwise pass unnoticed. There is another advantage to silence that many overlook. It strengthens self-control. Every moment you resist the urge to defend yourself unnecessarily, you reinforce the habit of acting intentionally rather than emotionally. You begin responding from clarity instead of impulse. Over time, this discipline transforms your presence. People recognize that your words are thoughtful because they are never rushed. They learn that your calmness cannot be easily disturbed, making emotional manipulation far less effective. Silence, when guided by wisdom rather than fear, becomes a quiet expression of confidence that protects your judgment and allows your actions to carry greater weight than your explanations. Recognize the hidden motives behind words. Words are powerful, but they rarely tell the entire story. Human communication is shaped not only by what is said, but also by what remains unspoken. Every request, compliment, criticism, or promise may carry motives that are not immediately visible. This does not mean you should become suspicious of everyone. It means you should develop the habit of looking beyond appearances before reaching conclusions. The person who understands motives is far less likely to be surprised by outcomes. Instead of accepting statements at face value, pay attention to patterns. Ask yourself what someone consistently gains from their behavior, whether their actions match their words, and how they respond when circumstances no longer benefit them. Genuine character remains relatively consistent across different situations, while hidden intentions often change as incentives change. Observing these patterns gives you a clearer understanding of people than relying on persuasive language alone. Many forms of manipulation succeed because they appeal to emotion before reason. Flattery can encourage trust before it has been earned. Urgency can pressure decisions before enough information has been gathered. Fear can persuade people to accept choices they would normally question. When you recognize these emotional triggers, you become less likely to surrender your judgment in the moment. You begin asking better questions instead of accepting easy answers. Developing this level of awareness requires patience. It is tempting to make quick judgments, but wisdom grows through careful observation over time. As you become more attentive to the difference between words, actions, and recurring behavior, your ability to recognize genuine intention strengthens. This deeper understanding protects your decisions, improves your relationships, and makes it increasingly difficult for others to influence you through appearances alone. Stop needing everyone's approval. The desire to be liked by everyone quietly weakens your independence because it places your decisions in the hands of other people's opinions. When approval becomes a necessity, you begin changing your words, actions, and even your values to avoid rejection. Manipulative people recognize this weakness and use praise or criticism to influence your behavior. True confidence grows when your self-worth is rooted in your principles rather than public acceptance. Respect is earned through consistency, integrity, and courage, not by constantly seeking validation. The less you depend on approval, the more freely and wisely you can make your own decisions. Build unshakable internal confidence. Confidence that depends on success, praise, or external recognition is fragile because it disappears when circumstances change. Internal confidence is different. It is built through discipline, self-awareness, preparation, and repeatedly keeping promises to yourself. Every challenge you overcome strengthens the belief that you can handle future uncertainty. This quiet confidence makes you difficult to manipulate because you no longer rely on others to define your value. Instead of reacting to criticism or chasing admiration, you remain grounded in your character, your judgment, and the standards you have chosen for your own life control your attention before others do. Your attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess because whatever consistently captures your focus gradually shapes your thoughts, decisions, and future. The modern world is filled with distractions designed to provoke emotional reactions and keep your mind occupied. When you allow every headline, opinion, or notification to control your focus, you slowly surrender your ability to think independently. Learn to direct your attention intentionally toward ideas, relationships, and goals that strengthen your judgment. A disciplined mind protects its focus, making it far more difficult for outside influences to manipulate perception or behavior. Set boundaries without feeling guilty. People who struggle to say no often become vulnerable to manipulation because guilt replaces clear judgment. Healthy boundaries are not acts of selfishness, but expressions of self-respect and personal responsibility. They protect your time, energy, values, and emotional well-being from unnecessary demands. Not every request deserves acceptance, and not every relationship deserves unlimited access to your life. When your decisions are guided by principles instead of the fear of disappointing others, you gain greater control over your direction. Strong boundaries allow you to remain generous without becoming easily controlled or emotionally exhausted. Think independently, not reactively. Independent thinking begins when you stop accepting every opinion simply because it is popular or emotionally persuasive. Instead of reacting immediately to what you hear, develop the habit of questioning assumptions, examining evidence, and considering different perspectives before reaching conclusions. This discipline protects your judgment from being shaped by fear, pressure, or public opinion. Manipulation becomes far less effective when your beliefs are formed through careful reasoning rather than emotional impulse. A thoughtful mind values truth over comfort and clarity over convenience, allowing decisions to be guided by understanding instead of momentary reactions or external influence. The highest form of freedom is self-mastery. Real freedom is not the ability to control other people, but the ability to govern yourself regardless of circumstances. Self-mastery means directing your emotions, thoughts, habits, and decisions with intention rather than allowing impulses to dictate your actions. It requires discipline, patience, and the willingness to confront your own weaknesses before judging those of others. When you consistently practice self-awareness and emotional control, outside pressure loses much of its influence over your choices. The person who has mastered themselves becomes remarkably difficult to manipulate because their decisions are guided by wisdom instead of emotional dependence. Becoming impossible to manipulate is not about becoming cold, suspicious, or emotionally distant. It is about developing the discipline to pause before reacting, to observe before judging, and to think before believing. Every principle we've explored leads toward the same destination, a mind that cannot be easily redirected by fear, flattery, urgency, guilt, or social pressure. When you separate facts from emotional stories, you begin seeing reality more clearly. When you recognize hidden motives, you stop confusing appearances with truth. When you protect your attention, strengthen your boundaries, and build confidence from within, your decisions become increasingly guided by reason instead of impulse. The greatest transformation does not happen when you learn to control other people. It happens when you become so deeply aware of your own thoughts, emotions, and habits that manipulation struggles to find an opening. Freedom is not found in controlling the world around you. It is found in mastering the world within you. Always remember this. The person who has mastered themselves becomes remarkably difficult to manipulate because their decisions are guided by wisdom instead of emotional dependence. If this video challenged the way you think, subscribe and become part of a community dedicated to mastering psychology, discipline, critical thinking, and personal growth. Every video is designed to help you think more clearly, make stronger decisions, and develop the kind of inner strength that cannot be easily influenced. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Which emotional trigger do you believe manipulates people the most? Fear, approval, pride, guilt, or anger? Share your answer below, and let's learn from each other's perspective.